5 chilling true stories featuring KingSpook. In some of these stories, I will be playing a female. Just an FYI. My little brother saved me from my stalker by Lil Bro Kicks Ass. I'm a 20-year-old college student, and my brother is 17. The story happened over summer as I was home from college. Our parents were out of town because it was their 25th anniversary, and they decided to take a vacation, leaving me and my brother home alone, which was fine by us. We spent most of the time drinking beer and playing Mario Party. During one of our game sessions, I showed my brother all the texts I had been getting from a guy I had gone to high school with. I didn't think much of them. They were mostly just weak attempts at flirting. Occasionally he would say something about one of my Facebook posts or about seeing me somewhere, but I thought it was harmless. My brother seemed really concerned. He pointed out that the guy was texting me at least 7 times a day. He told me if I ever needed him, all I was to do was text him the word help, and he'd come, no matter what. I laughed at him and said he was being paranoid. Obviously that sort of thing would never happen to me. I was very wrong. 2 days after we had that conversation, my brother was at his girlfriend's house, so I was completely alone. Me being the dummy I am, I posted on Facebook, "Home alone tonight, sad face." About 45 seconds after posting it, I got a message from the guy saying he could be at my house in 5 minutes and he wanted to spend time with me. I told him no, but thanked him for offering. He responded by saying it was too late and he was already on his way. I told him no again, but he insisted that I spend time with him, and he said he had something special planned for us tonight. I again said I wasn't interested, to which he responded, "Too late. I'm already here." I went to my front door and opened it, only to see him standing there, holding a bottle of very expensive red wine. I noticed the bottle had been opened, but it was still full. Now we get to the part I'm embarrassed about. I let him convince me to let him in. Once he was inside, he poured 2 glasses of wine. I didn't touch mine, because I noticed that he wasn't drinking his. He kept insisting that I drink mine, to the point of being angry that I wouldn't drink it. It was about this time that I realized something was wrong. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I texted my brother. When I left the bathroom, I noticed the guy had stood up and had his eyes locked on me. He looked furious. He mumbled something about how I hadn't done it the easy way. He started moving towards me and I froze. His eyes looked like those of an animal. I completely froze up. I wanted to fight and scream, but I just couldn't move at all. He grabbed me and forced me to the floor, but I still didn't fight. I shut my eyes and waited for the inevitable. But just then, a miracle happened. I heard the door open. My brother came flying in, calling out my name and asking if I were alright. My attacker stood up and tried to run, but my brother grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. He pinned my attacker down, then said the most intimidating thing I've ever heard him say in his life. "If you text her again, I'll hurt you. If you look at her again, I'll hurt you. If you touch her, I'll kill you." He then dragged the guy out of our house and threw him to the pavement. I've never heard from him again. Why You Don't Give Out Your Details Online by Crunch Munch. So when I was younger, I was an absolute idiot when it comes to using the internet. I'd constantly go into chat rooms assuming everyone was my own age and harmless, and basically answer anything people asked me. For the most part, I got through this period of my life without running into any trouble. Eventually, I did something really stupid though. Like most teenage boys, I spent a lot of my time online searching for porn, and I guess I was pretty bad at it because the best source I had was downloading things over Kazaa. At some point, someone messaged me I didn't even know you could message people over Kazaa, so I was surprised and a bit freaked out. From what I can remember, they just wanted to know more about me and what kind of porn I liked. I should probably mention I'm gay, and I'd never spoken about it with anyone in my life. I was only like 13 at this point. So I actually replied and started a conversation with this person, who told me his name was Glenn. Eventually, Glenn convinced me to add him on MSN Messenger, and we spoke over there instead since it was easier. For the most part, we actually had normal conversations, but he was always kind of off. I can't remember any details since this was over a decade ago, but I remember that he was interested in furry porn. Don't ask if you don't know what that is. And kept trying to get me into it, but it weirded me out. At some point, presumably because I had no one else to talk to and felt like I could trust this guy, I gave him pretty much all of my details. Real name, phone number, address. He lived in a different country from me, so we didn't talk over the phone often, and at first, he would always tell me on MSN before he phoned so that my parents wouldn't answer first. Eventually, he started calling on his own, at awkward times of the day, very late at night. He wouldn't let me hang up, guilting me into talking to him longer, until I started getting really freaked out and realized I fucked up by giving some random person my phone number. I think I made up some kind of lie about being grounded from the phone, so he stopped calling me for a while, and we only spoke online. At this point, I decided I was sufficiently creeped out and actively avoided talking to him, blocking him on MSN and only talking to him like once a week or less, knowing he'd phone me if I didn't. Eventually, he disappeared online and I was relieved, thinking it was over. Then the letters started. He'd never once asked if it was okay to send me anything, which it frankly wasn't. The letters he sent were obscene, saying how much he wanted us to meet up and do things, and had pictures of the most fucked up porn you can imagine folded into them. Keep in mind, I was not even close to being 16, much less an adult at this point, so this was really not appropriate. My parents were curious about the letters, but I made up some kind of lie about having made a pen pal, and they believed it and never opened any of the letters. That is probably the biggest bullet I dodged, though it was honestly probably a mistake not telling them. I never once replied to any of the letters, and actually asked him online not to send me things in the mail. I didn't want to make him angry because this guy knew everything about me. I told him I was moving out to live with my dad and wouldn't give him any new phone number. I was currently living with my mom and stepdad, so he got angry and blocked me on MSN. I was worried that he would call the house and try to talk to my parents, tell them lies or personal things I had divulged. He never called again, but before he disappeared, he sent a package in the mail. It was a large flat envelope, heavily stuffed and colored really strangely. It was pink, purple and red, and my parents were super confused when it arrived. I was afraid to open it, really not knowing what to expect. I don't even know how to properly describe what was inside. There was the usual variety of creepy furry porn, a small, folded flag of his country, and apparently stuff he had drawn. Most of it was not obscene, but I seem to recall some of it being laughably bad, drawn pornography. Opening this package and inspecting the inside was the biggest what the fuck moment of my life. He never sent me anything again, never called again, and we didn't speak on MSN anymore. He tried at least 3 times to talk to me through email, but I didn't respond. I threw out all his letters for fear of my parents finding them. TLDR, stupid kid gives address online, crazy guy, males porn. Little Girl That Likes Dead People by Care Bear, narrated by KingSpook.
I was working 12-hour overnights in a nursing home. I was on the general unit that night, and a resident was close to death. I got a report when I arrived at 6 p.m. from the day nurse, who told me that Mary's circling the drain. She'll go for you tonight. Obvious name change for patient privacy. She also told me that Mary suddenly had family showing up now that she was dying. Unfortunately, this is very common. Residents lived with us for years and we would never see a single family member until they were dying. Our residents were all private paying folks that could afford $8,000 to $10,000 a month for high-end nursing home care. The rooms looked like Hilton suites. When someone was close to death, family members would crawl out of the woodwork to prove how much they loved Grandma and all of her jewelry. Mary lived with us for 4 years, and I honestly didn't even know she had family. Her attorney visited regularly, but he was paid to oversee her care. I went to meet the family. There was a son and a grandson sitting in the room, and a little great-granddaughter that was about 7 or 8 years old sitting on the floor outside the room in the hallway. The adults sat in Mary's room, sleeping or playing on laptops, and let the little girl run all over the unit without any supervision. It was a long night. The little girl wasn't afraid of the elderly residents at all. I first caught her standing in another resident's room, stroking the face of an elderly woman. I thought it was sweet that she was visiting other residents, but stepped into the room and asked her to leave. I told her to please go back to her great-grandma's room and not go into the other residents' rooms. She smiled prettily and said, "I like the way her skin feels," as she left the room. Okay, so the kid is a little creepy. She goes back to Mary's room and I go about my duties. I don't see the kid for a while and it's super late, so I assume they took her home. About 1 a.m., I come out of the medication room and I see this kid standing in the hallway all by herself. She's staring into another resident's room, but not going in. I walk down the hall to send her back to her great-grandma's room again. This time, I'm really annoyed that her family is just letting her run around at 1 a.m. at her age, all by herself in a nursing home. As I walk up to her, before I can say anything, she smiles at me and asks, "Do you like to touch them?" Completely forgetting what I wanted to say, I just stare at her and say, "What?" She looks into the resident's room she was standing outside of and says, "The old people, do you like touching them? When they're dead, I mean." I don't even know what to say to this. It's dark and this kid is creepy. She's way too articulate for how old she looks. When I don't reply, she asks, "Does their skin feel any different when they're dead?" Not knowing what to say to a smiling kid who asks if I like touching dead bodies, I just tell her to go back to her great-grandma's room. She glares at me and looks angrier than I thought a kid could look, but she walks back to her great-grandma's room. Mary died at about 4 a.m. I didn't see the little kid again, but I was afraid that I would see her there rubbing Mary's skin. The son and grandson left before the funeral home arrived to take the body, but I didn't see the little girl leave with them. I assume that they took her home after we had our enlightening chat about how dead people feel. It gave me the creeps that I never saw her leave. I kept looking over my shoulder the rest of the night for that damn kid. The next morning, I told the day shift nurse, same one from the day before, about how creepy the little kid was. She told me, I'm glad she wasn't here on my shift. I just had the son and grandson. She swore that the little girl wasn't there on her shift. I guess she must have arrived after my shift started. Anyway, it was as I drove home that I realized that I hadn't seen anyone else interact with a little kid all night, except for me. I never saw anyone talk to her, and I never actually walked her into Mary's room. I also didn't confront her family about the kid's actions because, well, I didn't want to seem rude, complaining about their kid when their loved one was dying. The family had never mentioned the kid at any time I was in the room, and even the resident she was touching at the start of my shift never woke up as she stroked her cheek. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. Every night at work from then on, I always kept my eye out for creepy little girls. Kids in hospitals and medical facilities still creep me out to this day.
Gay Hookup Gone Wrong by Born in 1988. So there's this case in the news about a young man who was found dead nearby the Everglades here in South Florida after, according to friends, meeting up with a guy he contacted on the internet, and it just reminded me of a very unusual and scary experience I had. I was 21 or 22 when I met this guy on a gay hookup site. I'm a big guy, over 6 feet and 200 pounds in good shape, especially back then. This guy, however, was even bigger than me, which was probably the reason why I was so eager to meet up with him. This guy was a giant, near the 7-foot mark. He was a Christian music singer with a record deal. I really wish I could remember his name. Anyways, this strikes me as odd, and after a little bit of small talk and me teasing him about being a Christian music singer, fucking men on the side, we decided to hit the road. After the bar we were at, which was in the corner of my house, we decided to go to his house. He told me he lived in Kendall and that he had the place for himself. Kendall is a busy area with lots of townhouses and such, so I wasn't worried. However, after driving for a while, I noticed he takes to the Redlands, which is a rural area. I thought maybe he was taking a shortcut, but after a while, it was clear he wasn't going anywhere, so I told him that I thought we were going to Kendall, to which he didn't say anything, completely mute, just driving without even glancing at me. By this point, there's nothing but a 2-lane street in darkness with no cars in front or behind us. I tell him that I don't like it and that I want to go back to the city. He tells me that he knows a spot around here, and I tell him that I won't do anything in a car parked in a dead-end street. Not only is it trashy and uncomfortable, but also against the law. So he tells me that there's nothing to worry about. There's not even houses around here, which alerts me. At that point, I'm really thinking, what if this guy, this Christian singer, is nothing but a religious maniac, murdering gay men in the middle of nowhere? I keep insisting I want to go back, and he's flat out ignoring me. I try to open the door, and it's locked. I say that I want to get off, to stop the car, and he won't even turn around to look at me. At this point, it's clear to me that his intentions with me aren't the nicest ones. Well, apart from what I was expecting. He was clearly not intimidated by me, and he was so calm. All I could think about was whether he had done this before. By now, he's pulling into a dirt road. That's when I realized that I had to do something and my life was in jeopardy. I'm pretty sure at this point, I'd lost it a little bit and I didn't care. I didn't care to look composed or unafraid like I had been most of the ride. The only thing I could think of is hitting him, taking whatever beating could come after from such a beast. But suddenly, I see his phone, his big-ass smartphone, right in between us, connected to the car charger. I grab it and immediately call 911. He's yelling at me, asking me what the fuck I'm doing and to give him the phone. The 911 dispatcher is already on the line with me, and we both can hear her, but I'm just yelling back at him to let me out of the car, to which he proceeds. I step out with his phone still in hand, and he steps out as well, yelling that I give him back his phone. I throw it at him from the other side of the car. He mumbles something, gets in the car, and furiously speeds away. There I am, at 1 a.m, alone in the middle of nowhere, on a dirt road, hiding behind the bushes, hoping he doesn't come back, my heart stopping with every headlight I see approaching from far away, while I wait for my friend to pick me up. Sometimes I feel like maybe I overreacted. I didn't want to say anything because of the same reason. But then again, I see cases like this on TV and I'm really grateful for all the cheesy slasher films and the scary internet stories I grew up reading. The Scariest Sleepover of My Life, or The Rutland Rapist, by F. It was the summer of 2007. I was 16 at the time, and I had a bad habit of crawling out of my bedroom window and going for long walks in the middle of the night. I was pretty fearless by nature, but that summer, even I was getting nervous. There was a story going around of a guy in my neighborhood, not the best part of town if you know what I mean, attacking young women. The tale went that he would find them on a bus or at a bus stop, follow them until they were alone, and then sexually assault them. I thought it was just a rumor that persisted all summer and seemed to grow more elaborate and wild, rather than fading with time. On the second day of school, rumor became fact when the police liaison from our high school held an assembly for all of the female students. She told us that there was a man who was targeting young women, particularly petite girls, and that while no one had been raped, a few had been assaulted, but managed to get away. She told us to be safe and to never walk alone, especially at night. I didn't listen. Like an irresponsible teenager, I continued with my late-night adventures like I was invincible. At the time, my then best friend was dating a guy who really creeped me out. At the time, I was casually dating a less than stellar guy myself, so I really felt I couldn't judge. But this guy was something else. Every time I had ever encountered or spoken with him, my internal radar went off. He seemed like an average, laid-back kind of guy, maybe a little unmotivated, but an okay person. At the time, I couldn't figure out what it was that raised red flags for me, but I suspect it was his body language. That subtle communication that gave so much away. My friend and I had been growing slowly apart through high school. When she invited me for a sleepover just after Halloween, I thought it'd be fun. We could watch a Disney movie and eat Timbits. It'd be great. When I arrived, I was suddenly doubtful. When I accepted the invitation, I didn't know that her boyfriend had moved temporarily into her house. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. Her boyfriend was staying in the room beside my best friend's. I thought it was a weird situation, and I didn't really want to hang around him, but I loved my friend, so I stayed. Throughout the evening, the boyfriend would make little comments here and there, just inappropriate enough for me to shoot him a dirty look, but not bad enough for me to risk rocking the boat by calling him on it. Finally, my friend put her foot down when, as her boyfriend was carrying the TV into her room so we could watch a VHS. He suggested, jokingly, that we could have a threesome. My friend kicked him out of her room and told him to stop being gross. I was suddenly on edge. I didn't like the way he was looking at me as he left. I was so lost in my own thoughts, I hardly remember the movie. The movie ended around midnight, and my friend fell asleep before it was over. I turned off the television and flopped onto the mattress, but I couldn't sleep. A very strange thought was forming in my head. The guy stalking and assaulting women, his physical description matched her boyfriend's. Stalker guy's MO was to go after small young women. Both my friend and I were short and slim. I knew that boyfriend had been in my neighborhood around the time of the attacks. I had seen him at a bus stop once, on one of my midnight walks. I told myself I was just being paranoid, and yet I couldn't drop the idea. After about an hour of lying in the dark, I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard the door slowly begin to open. The room was set up with 2 mattresses on the floor, my friend on the one closest to the window, mine so near to the door that if I reached out my leg, I could close it. The door opened a crack before I reacted. On instinct, I stretched out my leg and pushed against the door, quickly shutting it. My heart was beating so fast as my brain whirred through the scenarios. Was it a burglar? No, I hadn't heard anyone coming up the stairs. It had to be the boyfriend. I waited quietly for a moment to see if boyfriend would say anything or knock. Maybe he wanted the television back. He didn't say anything, just tried the door again and again. I scooched further down the mattress to put both of my feet against the door. It was as if he couldn't quite decide what he wanted to do. He would try the door once or twice, walk quietly back to the room, wait a minute, then come back to try the door again. The door had no lock, so if I didn't keep my legs against the door, he could open it easily. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just kept doing what I was doing. Finally, after about 30 minutes of silently trying the door, he went back to his room. I didn't hear anything else after, so I think he fell asleep. For obvious reasons, I didn't sleep that night. I just kept my feet against the door and tried to figure out what I would say to my friend. I had somewhere to be early the next morning, and my rise came at 6, so when I snuck out, my friend was still fast asleep. I left a note for her to call me ASAP. Later in the day, I called the police non-emergency line and spoke to an officer. I told her that I didn't have a lot to go on, mostly intuition, but that I had a tip about the guy assaulting women in my neighborhood. The officer thanked me for the tip and reminded me to stay safe. For once, I listened. I didn't go on any nighttime walks for the next little while. Soon after, and before I got the chance to talk to my friend again, I think she may have been avoiding me because I knew she was around but never did call me. My friend's boyfriend was arrested. He had been the one after all. The guy sexually assaulted women. I guess the police were already suspicious of him, so when his DNA was matched to the last assault scene, he was caught. It was a terrible thing to go through, but my friend was really brave and she even worked with the police to get justice for the victims. The boyfriend pleaded guilty to 6 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm in May 2009. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and to be listed on the sex offender registry for 20 years. You can see 2 articles about him linked in the story in the description.